Alright troops, welcome to V. Going to talk quickly about the strategy in this specific fight, then get to the meat of this video, which will be discussing V gameplay in more general terms to help understand the character. So boosting style quickly is paramount, which means gaining as much as possible from low style game moves like regular shadow attacks, before using your finisher and stabbing heck out of everything. Whenever you finish anything off, you need to mash the button and get as much style out of it as you can. Once the second wave shows up, it's time to unleash Royal Fork and Nightmare and get the AoE attacks going to hit SSS and stay there. For the first fight, my target was 6300 points, and I would reset if I got under 6100. So anyway, V. There's a lot to talk about here. Obviously his gameplay is wildly different from Nero and Dante, but he's also unique in that I'm not convinced they actually playtested this guy on Dante Must Die. His familiars do puny damage and he builds style so slowly. It takes inordinate effort and optimization to hit style requirements, and is infinitely more strict than Nero or Dante on even their hardest missions in any game in the series. You need 6,000 points for each section, which means hitting SSS quickly, and without the right conditions this can be very tough. Learning how to fight enemies as V takes a backseat to learning how to game the style system the best you can. For the most part, the fact that your actual player character doesn't have to commit to anything means sitting back and jumping whenever things look bad will get you through 95% of situations. So you can dedicate most of your brain power to keep a running list of the last handful of moves you've used, and also focus on making sure all your inputs go through properly, because as you know if you've played V for any length of time, Shadow and Griffin are big fans of eating any move commands you might put in, and it will drive you insane. For the Behemoth fight, the order you kill things in doesn't matter much to your style score, but it does matter to the fight duration. Leaving the bats alive for as long as possible while you pile attacks onto Behemoth will delay its devil trigger from activating, and cut its effective HP value in half. Griffin's blockade can knock them all out of the sky, as can Hedgehog from Shadow, and from there you can use camera manipulation to stop them from being able to attack, or just keep an eye on them since they've got pretty big tails for when they're going to hit you. Skewer is your best attack for breaking his armour, along with hoping Nightmare plays nice for you. Your familiars will get KO'd extremely fast on Dante Must Die, and playing defensively with them is slow enough that your style gauge is going to decay like crazy. So managing your devil trigger so you always have Nightmare available when they're most likely to get hit is really important. Nightmare is also a complete dice roll. Sometimes he'll boost your style to the max, throwing out his big AoE lasers, or he'll just mess around punching air. So try not to rely on him for his actual attacks, and just treat them like a nice bonus every now and then. The only consistency you can guarantee is he'll probably hit something when you call him in, and it gives you a nice chunk of style. The third fight is by far the hardest to score on, which is why a buffer from the previous two can be very handy. Nightmare is automatically summoned via the cutscene, and when you have no style gains at all, having one of your bigger attacks only boosting you from D to C rank cuts your earning potential quite a bit. It also softens the first wave of enemies up enough that you can't score many hits either, meaning you have to use up all the style gain from finishers on low ranks once again. The actual battle itself is very easy and only fodder enemies that shouldn't give you any issue, but dragging it out correctly to maximise on style is the hard part. I dropped 300 points between the last fight and this one, although the Behemoth fight being such a high gainer and this one losing that much were definitely outliers in my attempts at this mission. S ranks on the fights in this mission are split into two different sections, and all that matters is the style point total after fight 3 and fight 5. Having too few points to get the S rank on the other fights doesn't matter as long as you hit 6k on the final one, but it's useful to build up a bit of a buffer so you have some room to mess up. I'm not going to pretend to know how this stuff is calculated across fights, because it appears to be some arcane bullshit to me, and it's definitely not an average, but I do know more points early means more points later. Most of the style gain in the Nobody fight is going to come from the first wave before the Nobody actually spawns in, since you can hit more than one enemy at a time and get your meter up. It follows the same rules as the first fight, just with some mildly harder enemies in the mix. The Nobody itself is a total non-issue. Without any buddies to back it up, you can just sit across the arena from it while your familiars go to town, and Nightmare and Shadow in unison have a decent chance of scoring a stagger and knockdown. The important thing is to watch out for stray exploding eyeballs. The silliest loss I had in this mission was messing up targeting and having Shadow attack one of those next to me, exploding in my face. Griffin doesn't have enough attacks to be able to use them all in sequence without them no longer counting towards style. Round Robin, the back plus lock on attack, and Double Check, his back forward plus lock on attack, can be extremely awkward both to input and score hits with, so a lot of the time you'll focus on damage with him, using the charged up version of his Lightning Pillar attack, Blockade, for the big AoE effect and ease of use. As such, this means Shadow, particularly his area of effect attacks, will be the most crucial part of how fights go. Learning when and where enemies spawn in so you can throw out the second hit of the delay combo and Hedgehog to hit as many targets at once is very effective. You can farm a full Devil Trigger gauge here, and you can return after the next fight to do it again before the boss, but it's slow and boring, so I settled for just enough to summon Nightmare. The Hell Juhdecca fight is probably the most awkward to keep style going. The other enemies you can use the previously discussed strategies on, but chances are the Juhdecca is going to be left over on its own, which means a long portion of the fight with not great style rank. It teleports all over the place, so half your moves are gated out, since stuff like Skewer and Double Check have so much wind up. With that knowledge, it's even more important to get it up early, especially when Nightmare is in the mix. This fight is an example of what not to do. I didn't keep up SSS for long, and I managed meter poorly, so I was sitting around doing nothing with stalemated familiars. Another one of V's many well thought out and fun mechanics. So learn from my mistakes and don't do these things. In longer duration fights like this, you should send Nightmare away when you've only got 3 bars left so you can respawn your dudes when they get knocked out. And the summon attack is also a good way to prevent style decay. Most of the Juhdecca's attacks are after a teleport, so you get a pretty enormous tail on them. When it's the only thing left, it's incredibly easy to avoid as long as you're even slightly paying attention. You might feel like you're hemorrhaging style here, but if you come into it with a little bit of a buffer, it should turn out okay. I probably shouldn't have summoned Nightmare here so I could have it for the first phase of the boss, but this fight was starting to get embarrassing and I really wanted to finish it quickly. I'd whiffed enough moves on this thing for a lifetime and it just would not go down. It's a pretty good example of how crazy weak V can get against devil triggered enemies. The Nidhogg fight thankfully has absolutely nothing to do with style, so you can just play in the back spamming Blockade over and over because no way in hell am I going in hard after finally scraping by the style requirements. Shadow is a complete bastard this fight and will rarely use his anti-air attack to hit the vines, and Skewer misses everything all the time, so you just kinda have to hope they swing low for him to be able to hit them. At max range, Shadow's AI tends to break down a bit anyway. For this first wave of tentacles you can blow them up immediately. They don't respawn and you get some DT out of them, which is useful if you enter the fight with meter and can afford to summon Nightmare here. Once he's knocked down, your biggest damage dealer will be Skewer, which is guaranteed to land. While you wait for the second wave of tentacles, you can try your hand at hitting more Skewers. You can side dodge to manipulate Shadow's position a bit better, but I went for the slightly higher risk, high reward play of trying to skewer him as he dives into attack. Shadow will get blasted half the time he does this, and you won't have a chance for more damage before the vines come in and it's time to summon Nightmare. Once this wave of vines hits, you'll have to kill them all around the same time or they'll start respawning. It's much better to leave one unfinished than it is to finish it off and let it respawn. When it regains energy after being dead long enough, it'll go back to half HP, as opposed to a new one coming in with max health. Nightmare can absolutely shred these things if you get lucky, or do nothing. Just stellar game design all around. You can repeat this pattern of summoning Nightmare to wipe the vines, sending him away when they're gone and calling him back when the next wave comes in till he's dead. The end of the fight can get really weird, like half the time he'll just not do his last phase properly. Here, he says the voice line for it, goes away, and normally a bunch of clones will come down, but instead it's just Nidhogg himself. Not sure if this is intended behaviour or not, but honestly who cares, this boss kinda sucks. No one's making a combo mad out of this, dudes. As a nice bonus, when he attacks you can jump on this guy's head for some devil trigger if you need the meter. Can be pretty nice. This third set of vines is a perfect example of how sometimes Nightmare just up and decides he's going to win the fight for you. While you could hypothetically use promotion and trigger these laser attacks yourself, the controls for it are stiff and clunky and you're very likely to end up just getting hit. Not worth the risk at all. And that's our first V mission. If I kept talking I'd be bloviating to fill dead air, so I'll leave you with the boss fight to play us out. See you next mission.
切られた虫は隙を許す。お前はどうかな。